Welcome, guys. This is Matthias Division live from Fuerteventura, I think.
We have episode 19 from the VCD Roundtable, and besides Matthias and myself, we have
Sascha Schwung, CEO and Cloud Architect at Division.
And Tobias Barschek, Cloud Architect at Division.
And we agreed on that we only introduce us by names in the future, but
nevertheless,
they will learn for the next episode.
Yeah. So as you can see today, we're not sitting individually in front of our computers. So it's really us, right? So just to prove it. So today's topic is all about NSX project, right? So we start introducing what are NSX projects and what's the idea behind the new feature. In version 4.1.
No, originally it has been introduced in 3.2, to be honest, but it was only available through the API. Into the UI, we are talking about 4. Whatever, and today we are talking about the latest version, so 4.1.2.01.
That's a long number. But perfect. We take that number. So what's the idea behind NSX project? Because as far as understood, we currently have a centralized network administration platform, NSX for SDN, but we just have a few centralized networking administrators, and that's it. So no multi-tenancy. So what's the idea behind NSX project?
As you mentioned right now, to have multi-tenancy in your SDN. So because at the moment we're always talking about having NSX on cluster number A or cluster number D, saying, okay, maybe we have federation to spread across data centers and so on, but there is not really a solution to provide different NSX capabilities to different organizations, to different departments, depends from what point of view you are looking, to your tenants. So to say, hey, okay, tenant number A should consume the tier 0 gateway on cluster number 1. Tenant number B should consume the tier 0 gateway on cluster B. And also only that their environment should be capsulated into single cluster environment. The moment we can only, or before we had multi-tenancy in NSX or the NSX projects, it was only doable with having fully separated NSX environments.
Would make sense with VCF for workload domain, yes, but with just a single cluster, or maybe just one centralized management for multiple clusters, it's one NSX.
And also in the VCF part, we know, okay, maybe we say, okay, we have a pair tenant workload design, but we know we have at the moment, as we are talking today with VCF version 5.1, we're talking about behavior that we can have up to 14 workload domains in a shared single sign-on, or we can have up to 24, 27, whatever, in a dedicated SSO environment. Yeah, 27 maybe is fitting, but yeah, if I need more, there is still the option available to say, hey, I will deploy multiple clusters per workload domain. And with NSX project to say, okay, inside my workload domain, I have cluster number 1 to project number 1. I have cluster number 2 to project number 2, which always relates to a tenant.
So Sascha, you're talking a ton with CSPs all around the globe, right? So we currently seeing a shift from a more shared infrastructure, which is installed and maintained manually, towards a VCF managed infrastructure. Yeah. So CSPs have the options to say, I have a centralized management domain, I deploy multiple workload domains for dedicated customers, or they decide sharing a workload domain amongst multiple customers, but one cluster each. So is there an option to improve NSX usability?
Yes, I think there will be some options, but to be fair, from my perspective, we have some limitations currently when we're going with, that's more on the NSXT side when we're talking about projects. And for that, I think we need to figure out on each service provider, does it really fit to work with projects? Or if we are currently fine with the shared environments, to go with one NSX T environment provider managed and have the dedicated environments for the customers who really need it. Because every NSX project will also be a manual task at the beginning to create it, to deploy it, and then bring it in. So that's not a standard customer who will use in the first time this NSX projects for their customers.
But still, it's like getting a tenant, providing the ability to manage their infrastructure, NSX or SDN infrastructure.
So, I mean, when you look at all of this, there are multiple use cases for these scenarios. One is the shared infrastructure, as Sascha just mentioned, but it's also about sharing permissions and roles, like what Toby said before. In the past, NSX was very restrictive. You had more or less, you had a few different roles. You could set some permissions, but it was really not as fine-grained so that you could say, it's like, hey, there is a user who gets access to these firewall rules, or you could limit a department for certain functionalities. Because if you look at larger corporations with VCF and things like that, it's the same story. They need sometimes security and other permissions on a per tenant basis, or then per organization unit or department basis. And so you have exactly that combination.
So I like mentioning all the features, but we could maybe take one step below the whole infrastructure. In a single NSX infrastructure, you have no chance to separate network access. If we talk plain NSX, so you have a few transport zones, you create a segment, and if you are allowed to create a segment or attach a gateway to a segment or something else, you can access all segments from all tenants. And I think even that's the lowest possible. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly done with NSX projects. You have only access to your own networks.
And also from an SP perspective, or also from an enterprise perspective, to say, okay, how many tier 1 gateways can I consume inside the project? How many segments can be created inside the project, and so on and so on? How many firewall rules? The whole story, we know what NSX is capable to limit. Also there, the capabilities of what a tenant can consume.
Well, that's a great mentioning, because the service provider himself always needs to keep in mind the limits of the whole infrastructure. Because the tenant view is very narrowed down. Yeah, I just have a few gateways, a few firewall rules, a few segments, but the big picture tells you something completely different.
Which is also what you see at the large-scale cloud providers. Is there is a reason why someone like Amazon or Azure gives you a certain set of network segments, etc. Because in the end, it always goes back to a higher level up infrastructure, and that infrastructure is limited. No matter whether that infrastructure is physical or virtual, there are limits.
Mm-hmm. We always keep saying, right, the sky is the limit, but yeah, unfortunately not.
No, your budget is the limit.
Oh yeah, but I could reference or citate someone saying on stage, and I remember it was 2012 February, Las Vegas. Someone said on stage, money was never an issue. It wasn't you.
That wasn't me.
But someone we all know. Maybe if you watch it,
I only know a handful of customers where never money is not an issue. Stock exchanges are fun from that perspective.
Okay, so we started talking about what are NSX projects, what are advantages, how we could use it for service providers creating dedicated clouds for their tenants with VCF as a foundation or as a base infrastructure. So the next step would be, what if we put Cloud Director on top? Because that's just one part of CSPs. We have the second part of cloud providers saying, right, I have a shared infrastructure. So now we talk shared, have Cloud Director on top, because as far as I understand Cloud Director, up until today, Cloud Director took care that tenant A is not able to connect any workloads to a network belonging to tenant B, or access networking configurations of a different tenant whatsoever. So NSX Projects is, from my understanding, for the base infrastructure, kind of a Cloud Director approach, but does it help, or does it add additional functionality to the Cloud Director stack?
I would rephrase your sentence from before.
Be my guest.
Saying, okay, Cloud Director is managing the network stack and limits what my customer, my tenant, is capable of doing inside his network stack. that he now with NSX project really get the capability of utilizing his network stack. That then can say, okay, I will create my dedicated tier 1 gateways. I will create my own firewall rules, and what is one of the biggest advantages, I will get the capability of reading log files, because this is also one of the big improvements in NSX project, that we now have a tendency also for the logging to see what's going on a routing perspective, on a firewalling perspective.
And that's a big part many service providers waiting for, because we had it with NSXV, and then it stopped with NSXT, and that was a big discussion at a few service providers or with a few tenants with the V2T migration, and now the log files in the tenant are back. So that's a real good point.
To be honest, from next to the advantages that I can limit stricter down than I can only do for today inside VCD, it is there. So you just need to enable it in NSX and bring it to your VCD environment, because VCD with the release of 10.5.1 is fully capable of utilizing NSX projects. But we all know what sounds great at the beginning maybe has some pitfalls.
But what I understood right now is with projects, we can add even more features to hand over into tenant self-service. Yeah. That's another great advantage. Yeah, but as you already started the discussion, so with a lot of power comes great responsibility. We have a few features which are not working. We can start just down reading the list, maybe VPN configurations for IPsec, for layer 2, that's all fine. Bridging for migration scenarios, that's all not working. VLAN segments for customers, okay, that's all good. But does it really block us? So from a feature perspective?
From a feature perspective, the answer would be no. Yeah. But as always.
But the answer is it depends.
The answer is it depends, as always. You need to do your work. You need to have a look what features are necessary, what features I would like to utilize to provide them to my customer. Because if I clearly can say, okay, I'm already in the VeloCloud game, so in the SD-WAN game, I don't need any kind of layer 2, layer 3 VPN. Okay, we have a solution. We can go with NSX project, as you mentioned before, because layer 3 VPN is not working inside a single project at the moment. If I say, hey, okay, I don't care about Kubernetes, and I don't think that we will find any kind of
there's a tier.
I don't think that we will find any kind of service providers not talking about tons of not talking about Kubernetes at the end. We need to wait until project still is do his evaluation. And say, okay, now we have the support for Kubernetes, we have the support for NSX ALB and so on.
Yeah, I think it's the problem with the Kubernetes support, or do we have the problem with the load balancer?
We have the problem with the load balancer at the moment, and to be honest, not really with the load balancer. We have the problem between feature interoperability between NSX ALB with the project side.
I assume, I hope it will just take some time and it will show up. So ALB is we consider maybe one of the bigger features currently not working with the project.
And to be honest, also there, Sasha and I was discussing this before. We cannot clearly give you a 100% sure answer, but also from our perspective, the not available support for the VCB, for the workload component protection, not protection. What is VCB is workload component. Yeah, this the VCB is
workload control plane.
Control plane, yeah, workload control plane. So the whole Tanzu story inside my vSphere environment is not working with NSX project at the moment as we're talking today. So also there.
So in the end, so if I come back to you as our VCDX group, right? So it's always like collect your business requirements, right?
We have seen this, I think, quite a few times in the last few years, that before you also decide upgrades and using specific features, that it's very important to fully understand the consequences, which I also think shows more and more why it's important for service providers to have a constant exchange with other architects about what's really working, what's on the release notes, and what can I actually use? Because what might sound great in the first moment, others might have figured out already it's not really working as expected. So it's always a good thing to have a group of architects at your hand you can actually talk to.
And I think an important point, the question we need to ask, can we import or add projects to an existing NSX manager?
That's a good one. I just want to start with that story again, because that's a good thing. And the bad thing, I start with the good thing and I leave the bad message to you, my friend. So the good thing is you can't just flip the switch.
I would split the answer now really into two different answers. On one hand, if as soon as you have imported your vCenter to your NSX environment, so to create a new compute manager, it is a single shot, so you can enable multi NSX support only one time. You cannot deactivate it afterwards, and you cannot activate it afterwards. But also, because Yves just mentioned the standardized deployment, the cloud foundation stuff, and so on. Although there is maybe a reason why multi-NSX is currently not supported in a VCF environment. So also here we need to wait. We need to wait until all of the problems are solved, and then move on with a standardized approach.
But again, as I said in either previous episodes or in some of my other videos around the VCF and Broadcom story, I'm pretty much expecting that over the next 2 years, we see that a good amount of R&D money from Broadcom is going into exactly these areas, is trying to get the integration of the products and APIs to a completely new level. Because in the end, if Broadcom wants to achieve their savings from a support, etc. perspective, the only chance to get there is actually getting all these products finally to work together in a way as users or service providers would expect.
But again, I come back to my answer saying, I think it's what you said implicitly is you cannot just change the NSX manager role. You can't say like I do projects, yes, and tomorrow like I reconsider manager.
You can enable it every time.
I can't disable.
You can disable it every time.
But it's not that easy. So, but what you always can do with Cloud Director, you can import two NSX managers. One is old school, right? Vintage, right? Like me, vintage. Legacy, just old. And you have a second NSX manager, project enabled, but I would recommend having two different infrastructures underneath.
No, this time I'm not at the answer, because the differentiator is not the NSX manager this time. Differentiator is really just the compute manager. So yeah, I can go saying, okay, vCenter A is the old one, the legacy one, no project enabled. Vintage one, no project enabled.
6.7.
6.7. Let's stay on that. And the new vCenter, this is my vCenter where I would like to go with project enabled, so you can really separate it on a per vCenter level.
And if you want to enable projects for an existing customer, I would say it's more a migration scenario in Cloud Director to move the customer from A to B. But again, create a design up front and collect the business requirements. If NSX Projects is a fit for this customer, yes or no.
Which brings us to an end, I would say.
Which brings us to an end, because the palm tree, the palm tree,
that one,
the palm tree, why is the video mirror? Also,
that palm tree.
So the palm tree is real because our initial plan was to stream from the rooftop pool bar, but the whole week is really windy from the weather perspective. And that's why we're sitting inside. And we blame Owen.
Who is also, by the way, the person who writes all the wonderful transcripts below our VCD Roundtable lecture. Good. And with that being said, I think that's it for episode 19, VCD Roundtable NSX Projects. And the next episode is actually going to be VCD Roundtable episode 20. And in episode 20, we are going to talk a bit about our expectations for changes in the Broadcom Cloud Provider Program, what this can mean for service providers, especially also if you are still of the opinion that Tier 2 might be your best option for you, because there might be some surprises coming your way. We will keep you posted when we record that and make that public. Up until then, have a great day.
Thanks.
See you.
Take
Bye.
care.